Staff Sergeant Maria Santos walked across the dusty training ground at Camp Pendleton, her boots crunching against the gravel as the California sun beat down mercilessly. At 28, she carried herself with quiet confidence, but the snickers and whispered comments from the younger Marines around her had become a daily soundtrack she couldn't escape. "Look who's trying to keep up," Private Johnson muttered to his buddy, not bothering to lower his voice as Maria passed their group. Staff Sergeant Soccer Mom thinks she can hang with the real Marines. The nickname had stuck ever since. Maria had mentioned picking up her daughter from school during a casual conversation 3 weeks ago. Never mind that she'd earned her rank through years of dedicated service. Never mind that she consistently outperformed half the Marines under her command during physical training. In their eyes, she was just another desk jockey who'd somehow stumbled into a leadership position. Maria kept walking, her jaw set but her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago that reacting to ignorance only fed it. The truth was, most of these Marines had no idea what real combat looked like. They'd joined during peacetime, gone through their training, and spent their days running drills and complaining about the chow hall food. Their idea of warfare came from video games and action movies. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, being mocked by Marines who'd never heard a shot fired in anger, never felt the weight of life and death decisions, never spent sleepless nights in hostile territory where the wrong move meant never coming home. But her service record was classified, buried so deep that even her commanding officer only knew the sanitized version of her military career. As she approached the obstacle course where her squad was assembled for afternoon training, Corporal Martinez caught her eye and shook his head apologetically. Martinez was one of the few who showed her genuine respect, though even he didn't know the full story. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan and recognized something in Maria's eyes that the others missed. The distant look of someone who'd seen things that couldn't be unseen. "All right, listen up," Maria called out, her voice cutting through the chatter. The Marines grudgingly formed a semicircle around her, some still smirking, others checking their watches as if they had somewhere more important to be. "Today we're running the advanced urban warfare scenario," she continued. "The situation is this. Hostile forces have taken control of a 3-story building. Your objective is to clear each floor while minimizing civilian casualties and extracting a high-value target from the top floor." Private Thompson, a cocky 20-year-old from Texas, who'd been particularly vocal about his doubts regarding Maria's capabilities, raised his hand with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Staff Sergeant, with all due respect, maybe we should have someone with actual combat experience lead this one. You know, someone who's been in a real firefight." The comment drew chuckles from several Marines. Maria felt the familiar burn in her chest, the same feeling she'd experienced countless times over the past months. But today felt different. Today, the combination of exhaustion from constantly proving herself and frustration at being underestimated had reached a breaking point. She rolled up the sleeves of her desert camouflage uniform, something she rarely did during training. The Marines fell silent, their attention drawn to her forearms. What they saw there made several of them take an involuntary step back. Covering her right forearm was an intricate tattoo that spoke a language only certain people in the military understood. It wasn't the typical eagle, globe, and anchor that many Marines sported, nor was it some motivational quote in flowing script. This was something entirely different. The tattoo depicted a skull wearing a green beret, surrounded by crossed tomahawks and lightning bolts. Below it, in stark black letters, were the words, "Night Stalkers Don't Quit," the motto of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. But it was the small details that made the hair on the back of Martinez's neck stand up. Tiny hash marks along the bottom, each one representing a classified mission. There were more marks than anyone in the group could quickly count. Woven throughout the design were symbols that only someone with deep knowledge of special operations would recognize. The distinctive winged skull of Air Force Pararescue, the trident of Navy SEALs, and most prominently, the Special Forces crest. But what really caught their attention was a small section depicting a black helicopter silhouette with the number 160 barely visible beneath it. Thompson's smirk had completely vanished. Johnson was staring open-mouthed. Even the Marines who'd been looking at their phones had put them away and were studying Maria's arm with newfound interest and growing unease. "As I was saying," Maria continued calmly, rolling her sleeves back down as if nothing had happened, "we'll be running an urban warfare scenario. The tactics we'll employ today are based on real-world operations that have been successfully executed in classified environments. The training ground had gone completely quiet, except for the distant sound of helicopters conducting their own exercises. The Marines stood frozen, their minds racing as they tried to process what they'd just seen. The woman they'd been dismissing as Staff Sergeant Soccer Mom had just revealed a piece of her past that suggested she'd operated at levels they couldn't even imagine. Martinez was the first to find his voice. "Staff Sergeant," he said carefully. "What unit did you serve with before coming here?" Maria looked at him for a long moment before answering. "That information is classified. Corporal, what matters is that I'm here now, and I have knowledge that could save your lives in a real combat situation. The question is, are you ready to learn, or are you going to keep assuming you know everything there is to know about warfare?" The transformation was immediate. The casual disrespect that had characterized the group's attitude toward Maria evaporated, replaced by something approaching awe and more than a little fear. They began to realize that they'd been mocking someone whose little finger probably had more combat experience than their entire squad combined. Private Thompson, who'd been so eager to challenge her authority moments before, now seemed to be trying to make himself as small as possible. The implications of what they'd seen were sinking in. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, were the absolute elite of military aviation. They were the ones who'd flown the Navy SEALs into Pakistan to get bin Laden. They operated behind enemy lines in conditions that would terrify seasoned combat veterans. And if Maria had served with them, if those hash marks on her tattoo really did represent missions, then she'd been involved in operations that would never be discussed in public, missions that existed only in classified files buried deep within the Pentagon. The Marines looked at each other uncertainly, suddenly aware that everything they thought they knew about their staff sergeant had just been turned upside down. The woman standing in front of them wasn't just another NCO trying to work her way up through the ranks. She was someone who'd operated at the highest levels of military special operations, someone whose presence here at Camp Pendleton was beginning to seem less like a normal assignment and more like she was hiding in plain sight. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training ground, Maria watched her Marines grapple with their new reality. She could see the wheels turning in their heads, could practically hear them wondering what kind of missions she'd been on, what she'd done, what she'd seen, but those were questions that would never be answered. Not officially. What mattered now was whether they were ready to set aside their assumptions and learn from someone who'd been tested in ways they couldn't imagine. The tattoo had done its job. It had spoken a truth she couldn't voice directly, had revealed just enough of her past to command the respect that her rank and experience deserved. The silence stretched on, heavy with unspoken questions and dawning understanding. Finally, Maria spoke again, her voice carrying a new weight that hadn't been there before. "Now, who's ready to learn how to really clear a building?" The change in the Marines' behavior over the following days was nothing short of dramatic. Word of Maria's tattoo had spread through the base like wildfire, though the story had grown more embellished with each telling. Some versions had her single-handedly taking down terrorist cells. Others had her flying black helicopters into enemy territory under cover of darkness. The truth, as Maria knew, was both more complex and more classified than any of their imaginations could conjure. 3 days after the incident at the training ground, Colonel Harrison called Maria into his office. She'd been expecting this conversation ever since she'd made the decision to roll up her sleeves. The colonel was one of the few people at Camp Pendleton who had the security clearance to access her complete service record, though even he didn't know all the details of her classified missions. "Close the door, Santos," he said without looking up from the files scattered across his desk. His office was spartanly decorated, save for a collection of unit patches from various deployments and a photo of him with his family at his retirement ceremony from active duty before taking this training command. Maria closed the door and stood at attention. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Colonel Harrison finally looked up, his weathered face showing a mixture of concern and curiosity. At 52, he was a career Marine who'd seen action in Iraq and Afghanistan, but even his combat experience paled in comparison to what was buried in Maria's classified files. "Sit down, Staff Sergeant. We need to talk about what happened during training this week." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Your squad's performance has improved dramatically. Their focus, their attention to detail, their respect for instruction. It's like they're different Marines entirely." Maria sat down, keeping her expression neutral. "They're good Marines, sir. They just needed proper motivation." "Proper motivation," the colonel repeated, leaning back in his chair. Is that what we're calling it? He opened a manila folder that Maria recognized as her service jacket. You know, when you were assigned here, I was told you were taking a step back from operations for family reasons. What I wasn't told was exactly what kind of operations you were stepping back from. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and distant sounds of Marines conducting training outside. Maria had been dreading this conversation, but she'd also been expecting it. Rolling up her sleeves had been a calculated risk, a moment when her frustration had overridden her usual careful discretion. Sir, my previous assignments are classified. You know that. I do know that. But I also know enough to understand that the 160th doesn't just hand out tattoos to anyone. Those hash marks on your arm, each one represents a mission that officially never happened, doesn't it? Maria met his gaze steadily. I can't discuss the specifics of my previous service, sir. Colonel Harrison nodded slowly. I'm not asking you to, but I am curious about why someone with your background is here, training Marines who think they know what combat looks like because they've watched too many war movies. For the first time since entering his office, Maria's composure cracked slightly. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. Those Marines out there, they have no idea what real warfare looks like. They think it's about charging forward with guns blazing, about being the loudest and most aggressive. But real combat, the kind that matters, the kind that saves lives and completes impossible missions, it's about precision. It's about thinking 3 steps ahead of your enemy. It's about making split-second decisions in environments where failure means not just your death, but the death of everyone counting on you. From her counting on you. She paused, her mind drifting to memories she'd spent months trying to suppress. I've seen good soldiers die because they weren't trained properly. I've watched missions fail because someone thought they knew better than their training. And I've been in situations where the margin between success and catastrophe was so thin that it measured in heartbeats. Colonel Harrison studied her carefully. The Night Stalkers don't typically cross-train with Marines. Your specialty was aviation, wasn't it? Special Operations Aviation. Maria nodded slightly. Among other things, sir. Among other things, he repeated thoughtfully. And those other things are what's classified. The truth was that Maria's service with the 160th had been anything but typical. While most Night Stalker pilots focused solely on aviation, Maria had been part of an experimental program that cross-trained pilots in ground operations. She'd flown missions into hostile territory, then participated in the ground operations themselves. It was a program that had produced some of the military's most versatile special operations personnel. But it was also a program that officially didn't exist. Sir, what I can tell you is that I've been in situations where the only thing standing between success and failure was training. Real training. The kind that prepares you for when everything goes wrong and you have to rely on muscle memory and instinct because there's no time to think. Outside the office window, they could see Maria's squad running through another training exercise. The difference from a week ago was remarkable. Where once they'd been casual and overconfident, now they moved with precision and purpose. They listened to instructions without question, executed movements with military precision, and treated each exercise as if their lives depended on it. Your methods are unconventional, Colonel Harrison observed, watching the Marines navigate an obstacle course. Yesterday I saw you teaching them breathing techniques that aren't in any manual I've ever read. Box breathing, Maria explained. 4 seconds in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. It's used in high-stress situations to maintain focus and control heart rate. Snipers use it, pilots use it during critical phases of flight, and ground operators use it when they need to make precise decisions under extreme pressure. And you learned this during your time with Special Operations? I learned a lot of things during my time with Special Operations, sir. Most of them I can't discuss. But some of them, the ones that can help these Marines stay alive if they ever see real combat, those I can teach. Colonel Harrison closed her file and leaned forward. Maria, I'm going to be direct with you. Your presence here is causing quite a stir, not just with your squad, but with the entire training battalion. Marines are talking, asking questions, trying to figure out who you really are and what you've done. I understand that, sir. But my past isn't relevant to my current mission, isn't it? Because from where I sit, it looks like your past is exactly what makes you effective in your current mission. He gestured toward the window where her squad was visible. Those Marines out there respect you now in a way they've never respected an instructor before. They're training harder, performing better, and taking their responsibilities more seriously than I've seen in years. Maria considered this. The colonel wasn't wrong. Since that day on the training ground, her Marines had transformed. They arrived early for training, stayed late to practice techniques she'd shown them, and approached each exercise with an intensity that had impressed even veteran instructors. But more importantly, they were learning skills that could actually save their lives in combat. There's something else, Colonel Harrison continued. I've been getting inquiries from other training units. Word is spreading about your unconventional methods and the results you're achieving. Officers are asking if you'd be willing to share your techniques with their Marines. This wasn't entirely surprising to Maria. Military communities were small, and news of effective training methods traveled fast. But it also meant that her carefully maintained low profile was beginning to slip. Sir, I'm not looking for attention. I'm just trying to do my job and train these Marines to the best of my ability. I know that. But sometimes doing your job well means accepting responsibilities you didn't ask for. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the training ground. Tell me something, Maria. Those missions you can't talk about. Did they prepare you for anything like this? For training the next generation of Marines? The question caught Maria off guard. In all her years of classified operations, she'd never thought about the long-term implications of her service. Each mission had been focused on immediate objectives. Extract this target, eliminate this threat, gather this intelligence. But now, watching her Marines execute movements with precision they'd never shown before, she was beginning to understand that perhaps her most important mission was just beginning. No, sir, she answered honestly. Nothing prepared me for this. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is to use what I learned to make them better. Colonel Harrison turned back to face her. I think you're right. And I think you're exactly where you need to be. As Maria left the colonel's office and walked back toward the training ground, she reflected on the unexpected turn her life had taken. 6 months ago, she'd been flying black helicopters into hostile territory, participating in missions that would never be acknowledged. Now she was teaching young Marines how to properly clear a room and control their breathing under stress. On the surface, it seemed like a dramatic step down, but increasingly it felt like a natural evolution. Her daughter Emma was thriving in their new stable environment, excelling in school and making friends without the constant worry about when Mom might disappear on another classified mission. And these Marines, her Marines, were becoming the kind of soldiers she would have wanted watching her back during her special operations days. As she approached the training ground, she could see her squad assembled and waiting for the afternoon session. But now there was something different in their posture, in the way they looked at her. It wasn't just respect born of fear or awe of her mysterious past. It was the respect that came from recognizing someone who truly knew what she was talking about, someone whose knowledge had been earned through experiences they could only imagine. Private Thompson, who'd challenged her authority just days before, was the first to spot her approach. Staff Sergeant Santos on deck, he called out, and the entire squad snapped to attention with a precision that would have made their drill instructors proud. As Maria looked at the faces of her Marines, young men and women who were eager to learn, eager to improve, eager to become the kind of warriors their country needed, she realized that perhaps this mission was more important than any classified operation she'd ever participated in. These Marines would go on to lead other Marines, and the lessons they learned here would ripple forward through generations of service members. The tattoo on her arm had revealed just enough of her past to command their attention. Now it was up to her to prove that the respect they were showing her was justified, not just through the mystery of her classified service, but through the quality of the training she could provide. All right, Marines, she called out as they formed up around her. Today we're going to work on something new. It's called situational awareness, and it might be the most important skill you'll ever learn. 6 weeks after Maria had revealed her tattoo, Camp Pendleton was hosting its annual inter-unit training competition. Marines from different companies would compete in various tactical scenarios, with the winning unit earning recognition and additional training resources for the following year. Maria's squad had volunteered to participate, something that would have been unthinkable just 2 months earlier, when they could barely complete basic drills without complaint. The competition scenario was challenging: a simulated terrorist attack on a civilian facility with multiple hostages, complex building layouts, and actors playing both hostiles and civilians. Other units had been preparing for months, while Maria's squad had been training with her unconventional methods for less than 6 weeks. On paper, they were at a significant disadvantage. Maria stood at the edge of the observation area, watching as the first competing squad entered the scenario. They moved with typical Marine aggression, charging through doorways and clearing rooms with textbook precision but little adaptability. When they encountered an unexpected obstacle, a civilian, who panicked and ran toward the hostiles, their rigid adherence to protocol caused crucial delays. 57 minutes, announced the judge as the first squad completed their run. 4 civilian casualties, 1 friendly fire incident, and partial objective completion. Captain Williams from Alpha Company approached Maria with a smug expression. His squad was favored to win the competition, and he'd made no secret of his skepticism about Maria's training methods. "Good luck out there, Santos. Hope your squad doesn't embarrass themselves too badly." Maria simply nodded politely. "We'll do our best, sir." When her squad's turn came, Maria gathered them for a final briefing. The transformation in these Marines was remarkable not just in their skills, but in their confidence and cohesion. Thompson, who'd once questioned her authority, now hung on her every word. Martinez had become an unofficial squad leader, helping newer Marines adapt to the advanced techniques Maria had taught them. Even Johnson, who'd been among the most skeptical, now carried himself with the quiet confidence of a true professional. "Remember what we've practiced," Maria told them calmly. "This isn't about being the fastest or the loudest. This is about being smart, being precise, and adapting when things don't go according to plan. Trust your training, trust each other, and trust yourselves." She looked at each Marine individually. "Thompson, your point man. Your breathing exercises will keep you calm when you encounter unexpected situations. Martinez, your team leader. Remember that your squad is only as strong as its weakest link, so watch everyone's 6. Johnson, you're our communications specialist. Clear, concise information saves lives." As her squad prepared to enter the scenario building, Maria felt a familiar sensation in her chest. Not nervousness, but the heightened awareness that came before entering a potentially dangerous situation. It was the same feeling she'd experienced before countless classified missions, and she realized that despite the simulated nature of this exercise, the stakes felt just as real. The scenario began, and immediately Maria could see the difference in her squad's approach. Instead of rushing in, they paused at the entrance, using hand signals to communicate while Thompson assessed the situation. They'd learned to read environments the way Maria had taught them, looking for details that other Marines might miss. When they encountered their first room of hostiles, they didn't simply charge in firing simulated weapons. Instead, they used the breathing techniques Maria had taught them to remain calm, employed tactical patience to assess the situation, and executed their entry with precision that impressed even the veteran judges. But the real test came 20 minutes into the scenario when they encountered an unexpected variable. One of the civilian actors had genuinely twisted her ankle and was in real pain, not just acting distressed. Other squads had treated this as part of the simulation and left her behind. Maria's squad immediately adapted. Martinez made the split-second decision to treat the situation as real, applying first aid techniques while Thompson and Johnson secured the area. They called for actual medical assistance while continuing their mission, demonstrating the kind of adaptability and humanity that separated true professionals from those who simply followed protocols. The judges took notice. This wasn't standard Marine Corps doctrine, but it was exactly the kind of thinking that real-world operations demanded. As the scenario continued, Maria's squad encountered increasingly complex situations, each one designed to test their ability to think under pressure. They found themselves facing moral dilemmas, tactical challenges, and situations where the textbook solution wasn't available. In each case, they drew on the techniques Maria had taught them, techniques born from her classified experiences in environments where adaptation meant survival. When they reached the final objective, the simulated rescue of high-value hostages from a fortified position, they executed a plan that stunned the observing officers. Instead of the direct assault favored by other squads, they used distraction techniques, coordinated timing, and what appeared to be intuitive understanding of their enemy's psychology. The result was flawless execution. All hostages rescued, all hostiles neutralized, 0 civilian casualties, and mission completion in 38 minutes, nearly 20 minutes faster than the previous best time. As her squad emerged from the scenario building, Maria felt a pride that surpassed anything she'd experienced during her classified service. These Marines had taken everything she'd taught them and made it their own, adapting advanced techniques to work within their own capabilities and demonstrating the kind of professional excellence that she'd once thought was reserved for special operations units. Colonel Harrison was waiting for her as the squad completed their debriefing. His expression was unreadable, but Maria could sense his satisfaction. "Impressive," he said simply. "The judges are calling it the best performance they've seen in 5 years of these competitions. They did well, sir. I'm proud of them. You should be. But more importantly, you should understand what you've accomplished here." He gestured toward her squad, who were being congratulated by Marines from other units. 6 weeks ago, those Marines were average at best. Today they performed like elite operators. That's not just good training, Maria. That's transformational leadership. Over the following days, the impact of the competition spread throughout Camp Pendleton. Other units began requesting that Maria share her training techniques with their Marines. Senior officers who'd never heard of her before were suddenly interested in her methods. The woman who'd once been dismissed as Staff Sergeant Soccer Mom was now being recognized as one of the most effective instructors on the base. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. 3 days after the competition, Maria received a call from her former commanding officer in the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. News of her squad's performance had reached the Special Operations community, and her old unit wanted to know if she'd be interested in developing training programs for other Special Operations forces. "We've been watching what you're doing out there, Santos," Colonel Rodriguez told her over the encrypted line. "Your squad's performance in that competition has people talking. The techniques you're teaching, they're based on our operational methods, aren't they?" "Some of them, sir. I've adapted what I learned during my time with the regiment to work for conventional Marines, and the results speak for themselves. Listen, we're developing a new training program for cross-unit cooperation between special operations and conventional forces. We need someone who understands both worlds. Someone who can bridge that gap. Interested?" Maria looked out her office window at the training ground where her Marines were conducting another exercise. They moved with confidence now, with purpose and precision that had become second nature. But more than that, they moved with the understanding that their training mattered, that what they learned here could make the difference between life and death in real combat. "Thank you for the offer, sir," she replied. "But I think I'm exactly where I need to be right now." That evening, as Maria picked up her daughter Emma from school, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that day she'd rolled up her sleeves and revealed her tattoo. Emma chattered excitedly about her day, about friends and teachers and school projects, blissfully unaware that her mother had once participated in classified operations that officially didn't exist. "Mom, are you famous now?" Emma asked as they drove home. "Kids at school are saying their dads talk about you at work." Maria smiled. "I'm not famous, sweetheart. I'm just doing my job." "What's your job exactly?" "I know you train Marines, but what does that really mean?" It was a question Maria had been expecting, and one she'd thought carefully about how to answer. "My job is to help good people become better, to teach them skills that will keep them safe and help them protect others, to make sure that if they ever have to face dangerous situations, they're prepared for it." "Like being a teacher?" "Like being a teacher," Maria agreed. "But for grown-ups who have very important jobs." That weekend, Maria attended a barbecue hosted by Martinez and his family. Her entire squad was there, along with their families, creating a sense of community that extended far beyond their professional relationships. As she watched Thompson playing with children in the backyard, saw Johnson helping Martinez's wife with the cooking, observed the easy camaraderie that had developed among Marines who'd once barely tolerated each other, she understood that her true mission had never been about classified operations or secret missions. Her true mission was this: taking individuals with potential and helping them become something greater than they'd imagined possible. It was about passing on knowledge that could save lives, instilling confidence that could overcome fear, and building the kind of character that would serve them long after their military service ended. Late that evening, as the barbecue was winding down, Thompson approached her with an unusual request. "Staff Sergeant, I've been thinking about re-enlisting," he said, "but I want to do something more. I want to try out for special operations." Maria studied the young Marine who'd once questioned her authority and now carried himself with quiet confidence. "That's a big decision, Thompson. Special operations isn't just about being tough or brave. It's about being smart, being adaptable, and understanding that sometimes the most important victories are the ones nobody ever hears about." "I understand that now," he replied. And I understand it because of what you've taught us. You showed us that real strength isn't about being the loudest or the most aggressive. It's about being prepared, being professional, and being someone others can count on when everything goes wrong. As Maria drove home that night, Emma sleeping in the passenger seat, she thought about the unexpected turns her life had taken. She'd gone from flying classified missions in hostile territory to training young Marines at a stateside base, from operating in the shadows to standing in front of a squad every day, visible and accountable for their development. But for the first time in her military career, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The tattoo on her arm would always be a reminder of the classified missions she could never discuss, the operations that officially never happened, the version of herself that existed only in heavily redacted files. But it was also a bridge between that past and her present mission, using everything she'd learned in the shadows to prepare the next generation of Marines for whatever challenges they might face. The Marines who'd once teased her for her rank now looked to her as a mentor, a leader, and an example of what professional excellence looked like. The respect she'd earned wasn't based on the mystery of her classified past, but on the quality of training she provided and the genuine care she showed for their development as Marines and as people. As she pulled into her driveway and carried her sleeping daughter into their home, Maria Santos, former Night Stalker pilot, classified operations veteran, and current staff sergeant at Camp Pendleton, knew that she'd finally found her true calling. The most important missions weren't always the ones that remained secret forever. Sometimes they were the ones that happened in broad daylight, with witnesses, with accountability, and with the knowledge that success was measured not in classified objectives completed, but in lives improved and potential realized. Her tattoo would always mark her as someone who'd served at the highest levels of military operations, but her legacy would be built in the training ground, one Marine at a time, preparing them for challenges they couldn't yet imagine with skills they'd carry for the rest of their lives.